Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson have the talent to become bona fide superstars in their third season, but their fate lies with Aaron Rodgers and how well he can perform at 40 years old coming off a torn Achilles. We discuss the 2024 fantasy outlook for the entire Jets offense on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. We are heading in to the New York Jets and digging into their entire fantasy outlook for this upcoming season. We only have 3 teams left to do, and then we're going to be getting into full-out fantasy football draft season after this. So I'm excited to hit on the Jets today, because last season we were just as excited at this time, right? We were looking forward to see what Aaron Rodgers could do for this team. Unfortunately, he got hurt on the Jets' very first drive, tore his Achilles. So then we had to watch Zach Wilson and Trevor Siemian and Tim Boyle start at quarterback for the Jets all season long. That made for a terrible scoring offense. They finished last in fantasy points per game last season as a team. Garrett Wilson was incredibly bad, especially for his cost, right? Finishes as a wide receiver 32 overall because he didn't have Aaron Rodgers. Breece Hall came through, though, finished as an RB4 in his second season in the NFL. The team added Mike Williams in free agency. They drafted wide receiver Malachi Corley in the third round, the first pick of the third round. And then they also added a lot of key pieces on the offensive line, which they needed to do. So I think we should start with Aaron Rodgers. He might not be the most fantasy relevant out of this group and have the most fantasy points, but he will be the guy that decides how good everyone else will be. So with Aaron Rodgers here, he finished as a quarterback 13 in 2022, his last full season. That was with Green Bay, but 28 in points per game. Do we think he has it in him to bounce back and to be this guy who can throw 40 touchdowns in a season again, like he did in both 2020 and 2021?
Well, when we were breaking down the Dolphins and we're talking about Tua Tagovailoa, it is very stacked at the top. So sometimes what we're looking at in the top 12 numbers, there could be a spike overall in what we are going to have the cutoff at there, right? That would say this is a typical top 12, but it could go a little deeper and show that position has a lot more options. And now what you have here is an interesting range, and I think there's going to be some really good value here. You have Kirk Cousins going as the QB 18, Matthew Stafford as QB 19, and Aaron Rodgers as QB 20. Behind them, there's some guys with question marks: Deshaun Watson, Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith, Will Levis. So I think this is a pretty sneaky spot to target a quarterback if you're in a streaming situation or you're just waiting late and you want to see what you can get, because Cousins is a really good spot. Stafford has a very good spot. We know that with his weapons. And so does Rodgers, really, when you look at it. So these 3 guys, I don't know, people don't know what to do with them. I guess they're aging guys that used to be QB1s that we could count on week in, week out, season in and season out. So now we're like, what are we going to do with Rodgers? He tore his Achilles. We don't know exactly what he's going to do. There are all the bad vibes of Nathaniel Hackett that carried over from Denver to New York last year. So this is a very hard assessment to make because, again, if you look at it on the surface, the weapons are shaky, right? I mean, you have Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, but a lot of questions after that. Mike Williams is seemingly always hurt, and he's made the transition from the Chargers here. And he's in a new offense. So I do like the concept and idea of not just Mike Williams, but you throw in Xavier Gibson, you throw in Corley, the rookie. Hall is a very good receiver, we know. I think the tight ends could be a bit used here in the passing game. So when we add it up, there are ways for Aaron Rodgers to put up numbers. The problem is, I don't know how you can expect a lot of touchdown passes because this is a defense-oriented team. They're going to run the ball. They've focused a lot on their offensive line improvements to get better running the ball. Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses, and then the first-round pick that they added. So when you look at all that, It's going to be maybe a running defense-oriented team. Rodgers is going to build on that and make some plays, but he's not going to give you much running at age 40 coming off an Achilles, if at all, what he used to, even the peppering of the extra production. And I just don't think he's going to have to throw a ton in these games because of how good that Jets defense is. So, again, Rodgers, I think, is going to be a much better reality quarterback for the Jets and what they need. I mean, he has to be better than what they had last year. But in terms of fantasy, I look at Cousins, Stafford. There's things you love about what they can do, the volume and the weapons. I don't see that same with Rodgers here as a deep QB2.
Yeah, my biggest worry, I should say, with Rodgers coming off this Achilles injury is that he was already so bad under pressure the last 2 seasons that he played
Yeah.
full in 2021 and in 2022. Like, his stats look good in 2021 and he finished well in fantasy, but he still struggled under pressure. And then that became only even worse in 2022 with his older age. The only quarterback who has a lower completion percentage under pressure since 2021 is Zach Wilson. The only guy that has a lower completion percentage than Aaron Rodgers is Zach Wilson over the last 3 years. So we know this Jets offensive line really struggled last year. They had the third worst PFF team pass blocking grade. They allowed the second most quarterback pressures. Now, maybe you put that on the quarterbacks a little bit, but Rodgers was pressured on his 2 dropbacks last season. On both of his dropbacks he took, one was an incomplete pass, one turned into a sack that led to the torn Achilles. So this offensive line, the changes they made, they brought in Tyron Smith, they brought in Morgan Moses. Those are veteran tackles. They drafted a tackle with their first round pick in Alu Fashanu. So, and then they also changed their guard with John Simpson, who played for the Ravens last year. So hopefully those changes matter and they are much improved because they're going to have to be for Rodgers to be good for in real life or in fantasy, and also for him to get the ball down to, down the field to his playmakers. They're going to have to hold up. I will say, are we worried at all that Rodgers won't be ready for the season coming after Achilles? Or we're saying he's good to go week 1? He'll be out there and fully healthy.
Well, I don't think we worry too much about it, right? He's not a high demand quarterback. Well, we'll monitor it just in case. And they do have much better backup situation, by the way. I mean, Tyrod Taylor is kind of the Jacoby Brissett of the Jets, and these guys just get hired and get throwing on any team they're on, much like Ryan Fitzpatrick, who was when he bounced around teams, so that you can get some value out of Tyrod, right? If there's any issue with Rodgers, because we know he can run and put up some numbers. He has a strong arm. So the situation is not going to be as dire, right, for the weapons should Rodgers go down again, because Taylor, we know he facilitates things. He gets the job done. He's going to just get the ball in the hands of the playmakers as much as possible. So he's going to keep the engine running for fantasy. But again, if we're worried about Breece Hall or Wilson in relation to Rodgers' health, I think we don't have to worry about that as much this season. We'll get into both of those guys here, and they're very elite RB1 and wide receiver 1 values in our next segment.
Yeah, that's really what this all comes down to. Aaron Rodgers means so much for Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. I'm not really trying to draft him in fantasy. I'd rather Matthew Stafford or Deshaun Watson going around him. But we're going to dig into Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson because they honestly, I mean, they both have top 5 upside at the position. We already saw it from Breece Hall last year. Hopefully, we can finally see it out of Garrett Wilson. We'll dig into them right after our break. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. I know anytime I'm going to an Astros game or anytime I've lived in a city and went to any sporting event, I just hop on the Game Time app. It's super, super easy. I know I'm getting the best deals and I can see exactly where I'm sitting, which I think is the most clutch thing. It's just a super easy app to use. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. And tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. All you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So Breece Hall last year, he finishes as the running back 4 overall, running back 7 in points per game. So not as consistent. It really was an up and down year. 5 weeks as a top 5 running back. So huge games. But then also 8 weeks, he finished worse than the running back 20 on the week. A lot of weeks finishing worse as the running back 30 on the week. So it was an inconsistent year, but he was just coming off an Achilles tear, or not Achilles, sorry, an ACL tear from his rookie season. So he was still, just getting back from that. He put up nearly 1,600 scrimmage yards. The touchdowns, only 9. That's what kind of kept him a little bit more inconsistent because he's playing on a bad offense. But now with Aaron Rodgers, we expect him to score more. Breece Hall's going now as the running back 3 in ADP, 7th overall. Are you brave enough to draft him that high, Vinny, this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to put aside the injury stuff, right? I mean, he came back and he produced last year. He was what you wanted, and if you look at it now, RB3 versus what he was last year, RB4 and 7. Yeah, you can feel very comfortable with that. You would say the arrow's pointing up with Rodgers in a full season because he might have had a much bigger year if the Jets offense had been competent, put him in position to score a few more times, or he'd connected with Rodgers on some big plays in the passing game, off screens and all that. So when you look at this situation, I think Breece Hall has that home run ability. And I love the receiving first aspect there that he brings. Bijan Robinson also has that behind Chris McCaffrey. The volume is going to be there. There's not much behind him, right? There's going to be a bit of a competition. You have different guys in there. You had Izzy Abanikanda, and then they went out and got Braylon Allen from Wisconsin. So he's now looking like the top backup, the rookie there, and he's more of a power back. All these other guys have some upside, but they're more limited in their role. Like Breece Hall is a complete feature back. So he's going to have the dominant touch role in this offense. He could be a throwback to Aaron Jones and what we saw a few years ago when the Packers were playing well. Jones had a lot of scores. Aaron Rodgers wasn't a big fantasy factor, but he facilitated a lot of things going on. So I think there's some Aaron Jones type upside in Jones's best season in Breece Hall. And we know Jones has been near the top of the league in scoring at his position when he was a younger back. So I all say that Breece Hall, I think it's worth it. Swing for the fences a little bit. And I want to make sure, again, this is what separates these guys, CMC, Robinson, and Hall, from like the Derrick Henry types, right? I mean, they're going to have a big role catching balls, and I think that's why we have a lot of appeal with Saquon Barkley. Maybe the checkdowns bump up a little bit for the Eagles this week or this season to go up on what he's already done. So, yeah, these receiving backs really separate. And what I love about Hall is that, again, even if he's not getting you the touchdowns the way that you would expect, he's going to have some big games, as you mentioned. He's going to be a week winner a lot of times. He's going to carry your team to victory, and he could very well be a league winner as well if you're in that fortunate position to draft him early.
Yeah, so I'll say my biggest issue with his price is that he has to be way more consistent this year, and there's reasons why he should be, right? He has Aaron Rodgers back. He's a year removed from the ACL injury. They fix up the offensive line. You can find all the reasons why it should be better, but just going back throughout his career, he has scored 12 or fewer points in 11 of 24 career games he's played. That's 46% of games. Scored fewer than 9 points in 38% of career games. Like, you can't be taking a guy 7th overall, running back 3, if he's that inconsistent. So he has to be more consistent this year. Now he's going back to back with Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall are going back to back in drafts, 6th and 7th overall. If you're making that choice, who are you going with? I'm personally on the Bijan Robinson side. I don't know. I like his type of play style a little bit more. I think they're both going to be heavily used as a receiver. I'm slightly on the Bijan Robinson side.
Yeah, Bijan has got so much talent. I love the offense that he's going to be in. He's going to get a lot of touches, and he's a great receiver as well. We know that. He's a complete back. So I'm excited for Bijan. And then it might come into play here behind Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs. There's some appeal there with Taylor, right? I mean, he's an offense with a running quarterback, very good offensive line that's developing here, and a pass catcher when needed. And there's really a drop-off to that second back, much like with Breece Hall. We're not sure with the backup situation. I think Jahmyr Gibbs, you can say, okay, there's still David Montgomery, so that's a little bit. So maybe we stop there. But I think it's fair to say Breece Hall is a top 4 option. That's exactly where he finished last year in terms of the overall scoring. So again, you should say that arrow points up, but I do like Bijan a little bit more than Breece.
Yeah, Hall has a huge ceiling. He really does.
Yeah.
I want to see more consistency. I'm happy to pick him. I'm just a little nervous. Really quickly, I am in a keeper league and I have to choose between Breece Hall or Monroe St. Brown. It's half PPR. Which way would you go?
That's a tough one. I would say based on the shelf life, I think I got to go Amon-Ra. I mean, he's just been so good, and he's still young. Keep that in mind. I think Breece Hall, just a little injury factor. It's close, but I would say Amon-Ra is going to be pretty consistent for many years to come. And Hall, who knows? Running backs can break down. He already has an ACL.
I'm sure I'll change my mind every day up
Yeah.
until when I have to make my
I
keeper.
just love Amon-Ra now. Like, it was very slow to say that I'm going to put him up there. You know, he's a slot receiver, doesn't score a lot, but now I think he's arrived as that dominant force. So it'll be interesting to see, however, where Amon-Ra goes in relation to our next guy we're going to talk about, Garrett Wilson. So, Michelle, Garrett Wilson right now is going as wide receiver 11. And
Wide receiver 8, 11th overall.
11th overall. Wow. Okay. This is a little bit, I guess you're looking at McCaffrey, Robinson, and Hall. Those are it, right? And then you work in the wide receivers. So 11th overall, 8th wide receiver. That is pretty aggressive, right? I mean, Amon-Ra is going as pretty high as the number 5 receiver. A.J. Brown, the other Brown, is going at 6. Puka is going at 7. And Garrett Wilson, 8. So this is pretty tight. We know who the guys are in front, right? It's the usual suspects that would expect: CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, and Jamar Chase. So those guys are going at the top. Here's this group. Now, Wilson I like, but I mean, I think it's fair to put the 2 Browns and Nacua because their situation a little bit ahead of Wilson, but I think it's fair to put him this high. I think one guy would maybe start to put in the conversation more is Chris Olave with his role, but I think Wilson is in a better spot. He's a better talent than Olave. And look, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going right behind Garrett Wilson. I think Garrett is going to give you a little bit better stuff here because, again, he's the kind of seasoned guy at Ohio State. And I'm telling you, Michelle, he made a lot of bad quarterback play look good last year when he was on the field. And I think if he gets going with Rodgers, watch out. He's going to pick up on the upside. But I think it's fair that you like the 2 Brown, sort of St. Brown, and Nacua over Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, it's all close, right? The issue is he was going around this spot last year, right? It may be even a little bit later, but so it is crazy to see him still going so high with what a disappointing year he had. And we're all just going to put it on the quarterback, and that's completely fair. But he was wide receiver 40 in points per game last year. He averaged 9.8 points per game and half PPR with the 4th most targets in the league. He had 168 targets last year. His 9.8 points per game last season were the fewest by any player in a season with 160 targets since the NFL started tracking targets. No player ever averaged fewer than 11 points per game that had 160 targets. And again, he was at 9.8. But the last player, other than Wilson, to have 150 targets and score fewer than 10 points per game was DeAndre Hopkins in 2016 when he was playing with Brock Osweiler. And then that very next year, he scored nearly 21 points per game and half PPR in 2017. That's with Deshaun Watson and Savage and Yates. They all had to play because Watson got hurt early. But just a little bit of change of quarterback, and all of a sudden he shot up. But I will say, like, with Wilson's quarterback play, it has truly been terrible. The last 2 seasons, he has the lowest percentage of catchable targets among all players with 200 plus targets over the last 2 seasons. It goes Wilson's the worst catchable target rate, then DeAndre Hopkins, then Amari Cooper, Devontae Adams, Terry McLaurin. Like, it's been bad for him. And we expect Aaron Rodgers to give him a lot of catchable targets, right? So I think the hardest decision is deciding between Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson, and Marvin Harrison Jr., right? You're hoping Puka wasn't just a one-hit wonder with his insane rookie season. You're hoping Garrett Wilson just gets way better with Aaron Rodgers, and then Marvin Harrison, he's a rookie. So it's just all projection. I have a very hard time ranking those 3 guys in any order.
Yeah, I do too, but I think you're not going to go wrong with any of them. I just don't see it. And I like the fact not only do you have Rodgers, I mentioned it again, they're Taylor. Just having somebody who's going to just get the ball in his hands, and that's what he's done. And you just have to weigh a lot of other factors. You might say it's hard the way that Kyler Murray's trying to rebound versus Aaron Rodgers coming off the injury, and then Matthew Stafford, how you rank these guys. I mean, I think I would go in this order just based on kind of their volume and target. I think I'd go Nakua and Wilson, and then I go with Harrison because Harrison is still rookie. There's still some variable there. Nakua, I don't think there was anything fluky about what he did. I mean, he was just blowing by guys, and they're not stupid. They're like Sean McVay is going to put him on display, and Cooper Kupp, we saw he's slowing down. So there's definitely an alpha change there that has already been taking place. So it's very close, but I don't think you're going to be disappointed with any of them. I just think this is how we might have played it out. Like, I think you look at those 3 running backs, but if they're not on the board, you immediately look to this tier. And I think maybe what we do, maybe the way to look at it is AJ Brown's still got a share. Devontae Adams going after these guys is in a tough spot. So I think how you look at it is you want to attack this tier. That's what I'm going to say is that St. Brown, Nakua, Wilson, Harrison, and Adams. You want to get one of these guys in most of your leagues. And it may be different based on your order, who goes before, but I think just target this range in particular, and I think you'll be pretty happy.
Yep, I want one of those guys on my team for sure. And it's more than Nakua, Wilson, Harrison range.
Yeah.
I think Adams would be just under them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be as excited to get him. And listen, there's been rumors he could go to the Jets. I don't think it's going to happen, but that would change everything, right? I mean, that would push Garrett Wilson down a lot, but that's a conversation to be had if that does come to fruition. I don't see it happening.
Yeah, we will talk about the receivers that the Jets actually do have, other than Garrett Wilson, that are the options. Adams is a pipe dream, but we will get to those tangible potential weapons here for Aaron Rodgers in our final segment of the show. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With more than 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, Michelle, we will first talk about podcast favorite, Mike Williams. And it was a bad year for Mike Williams. This guy always, when he's so promising, just gets hurt or something happens. He falls backward, hits his head or knee, and then he's out, and then gone are his big numbers, right? But we've seen when he stays on the field, he can put up massive numbers because he does 2 things really well: stretch the field with his big body and score touchdowns. I feel bad for him because I think if he'd stayed healthy, he could have been a Mike Evans type, right? And been pretty consistent with his numbers on the outside. But here we go. Another chance for him. And I'm glad he got out of the current version of the Chargers because that's not going to be a pass crazy team. But he's in a really good spot. If he can stay healthy, his ADP is only wide receiver 59. So that's a kind of a wide receiver 5, right? If you look at 12-team leagues in the top 60, that's where he's going right now. Look at these dudes that are going around him. Joshua Palmer, his old teammate, Rashid Shaheed, Jerry Jeudy, Brandon Cooks, Jahan Dotson. Mike Williams is the number 2 receiver on the Jets. Like, if he's healthy, he's going to be out there. And Malachi Corley, look, he's a rookie, and there's some buzz about him, but there's still a lot of work to be done. He's been banged up as well. So, I don't know, Mike Williams maybe just being undervalued here again. I know everyone's just worried about his injuries, but you're investing a really late pick in him. And so you're looking at upside with Rodgers, right? This outside big play threat has been putting up numbers for Rodgers in the past. And he's going to get very nice coverage away from Garrett Wilson, much the way he got from Keenan Allen there in Los Angeles. So, yeah, I think Mike Williams is being undervalued, but I don't think I want to go Malachi Corley. I think, unfortunately, I'm not exactly sure what role he's going to have. I think I'd rather go with Mike Williams and maybe take a shot on a tight end for the Jets.
Yeah, there's no reason that Mike Williams is going wide receiver 59. That's just crazy low. I get the torn ACL, but that was in week 3. He's had plenty of time to recover. They did put him on the PUP list to open training camp, but that's pretty much, that was known to be, he can come off that at any time. And he personally says he'll be ready for the season, but that's just player speak. We'll see if it actually happens, but I do expect him to be ready for week 1. But over the last 3 seasons, Mike Williams has averaged 12.3 points per game in half PPR. That puts him at wide receiver 16 in points per game over the last 3 seasons. That's more than Jalen Waddle, more than DK Metcalf, more than T. Higgins, more than Terry McLaurin, more than Amari Cooper. And he's still only 29 years old. Like, this dude has time left. He averages 71.6 receiving yards per game over the last 3 seasons, 14th among wide receivers, more receiving yards per game than Mike Evans has averaged over the last 3 seasons. He's being slept on. We know he's that deep target. And like, again, I'm not too worried about the ACL because he has never really relied on like great route running. That's not his thing. And ACLs don't affect you too much with the straight runs. Like, he just needs to run straight, go fast on the field, and he makes those acrobatic, really contested catches, which Aaron Rodgers is a dude that will throw it up to his guy and trust him if he proves that he can be trusted, which Mike Williams has proven that he can be trusted to come down with those. So yeah, I just can't imagine ever taking Romeo Doubs or Jerry Jeudy or Brandon Cooks over Mike Williams, he's going after all of them. No, I'm not worried about Garrett Wilson's workload. He'll get it, but Mike Williams also played with Keenan Allen, who got a huge workload. Like, he's going to be the secondary guy. He doesn't need a lot of targets to get it done. He's going to be on every single one of my teams at his current cost. Malachi Corley, he's going so late that he's probably not even considered unless it's a dynasty league, right? Or just a super, super deep league. He's really good after the catch. But I don't know if Nathaniel Hackett is smart enough or creative enough to know how to use a playmaker like Malachi Corley, especially in year 1.
Yeah, and there's some other guys still around. I mentioned Xavier Gibson, and you still have Alan Lazard hanging around here, one of Rodgers' former cronies. He's still there if Devontae Adams isn't. So some guys are still there, and Lazard has played the slot before. We know Gibson can play the slot as well. So just be aware of those guys. They do exist. They're on the roster, they're on the depth chart. So it's not going to be a clear path to Corley. He's going to have to first fight to get on the field. And keep in mind, Aaron Rodgers is very demanding of young receivers. If he doesn't like what he sees, run a wrong route, drop a ball, you're not going to be in the rotation catching passes from him. So that's all it takes with Corley. Like, he'll be doghouse by his quarterback for a bit. So, and then if Rodgers loves you, then he's going to keep throwing to you. So that's what we hope, that he takes a shine to Mike Williams. He stays healthy early, makes some reliable big plays with Rodgers that help them win games. And all of a sudden, Mike Williams is in business playing off Wilson. So I love Mike Williams. I don't like Corley at all this year. I think it's not bad if you're looking deep dynasty. I mean, you can go after him there and stash. But I think with Williams, again, he's low risk, high reward. It's very low risk. You're not spending a wide receiver 4 cost. You're going wide receiver 5, maybe even after that in some leagues. So this is a very low investment where you can take a shot. If it doesn't work out, just move on. You're not investing a really high pick in him, but there's just so much potential that it's a really sneaky pick to make at that stage in the draft.
Yeah, you could steal a top 20 wide receiver at that spot if he's healthy throughout the season. And then the last guy we could talk about here, Tyler Conklin. Listen, if we're going to give everyone else a shot to, get better with better quarterback play, maybe we have to do it for Tyler Conklin. He was second on the team last year on the Jets in receiving yards. He had the 13th most receiving yards among tight ends last year. The issue was he had 0 touchdowns, right? He was a tight end 19 overall last season, tight end 24 in points per game. He did nothing ever. There was one game where you would have been slightly excited if you played him. He finished as a tight end 6 on the week. Everything else was just abysmal. But if he scores touchdowns this year and his targets stay up, maybe he's a guy in 2 tight end leagues, but I don't think so. I'm not excited about Tyler Conklin.
Yeah, I mean, this is the sleeper zone of tight ends, as we'd like to call it here on the show. And we've talked about a lot of these guys of late. We have Mike Gesicki. We have Juwan Johnson, if he can get healthy. Jonnu Smith, we just talked about. Yeah. We have Ben Sinnott as well from the Commanders, the rookie Chiga Okonkwo, who knows what his role could be in the offense. And then Cade Otton, again, we haven't really talked too much about Cade Otton, but he's a guy that is set for an expanded role potentially as the third receiver at Tampa. So they all have better paths to production here than Tyler Conklin. Again, Mike Williams pans out a little bit, and there's a little bit of a committee there also with the Jets tight end situation. So, and it's a new quarterback. Conklin has not really had a chance to be on this field with Rodgers consistently. So he's still getting to know a quarterback in games that count. So yeah, not interested in Tyler Conklin at all. I mean, I think he's been forced as one of those names. Hey, maybe stream Tyler Conklin, and then you play him, and then it's like, why? Why did I play him?
Yeah.
So I think he's done. He had his time, that very short time with the Vikings, where it's not bad. He's a good athlete, he can make some plays, but just not relevant enough for me to even go there when there's so many other good tight ends in that range you can take a dart throw on.
Yeah. And like he was competing against Alan Lazard and Xavier Gibson for targets last year.
Yeah.
Now he has actual competition with Mike Williams, Malachi Corley, and then still those same guys. So totally out at him. That is it for today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football. Thank you to you all for making us your first listen every day. Everydayers, Vinnie and I will be back tomorrow talking about the final two teams we have to hit on. We're putting the Broncos and the Patriots in one episode together because they don't have a lot of great fantasy options, but there will be some guys on their teams that are relevant and help you win next year. So don't miss it. Bye, y'all.